I want to issue a challenge to all of us to become intellectually engaged as Christians. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean learning what we as Christians believe and being able to explain to people why we believe it. Learning what we as Christians believe and being able to explain to people why we believe it. This is a momentous decision. It is a step which millions of American Christians need to take. Why should you take this step? Well, let me give 3 reasons. Number 1, shaping culture. Shaping culture. We've all heard of the so-called culture war going on in American society. Now, some people may think this sounds militaristic, but the fact is that a tremendous struggle for the soul of America is raging right now. This struggle is not just political. It has a spiritual or religious dimension as well. Secularists are bent on eliminating religion from the public square in American society. The so-called new atheists like Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, and Richard Dawkins go even further. They want to exterminate religious belief entirely from American society. American culture has already become post-Christian. Belief in a sort of generic God is still the norm, but it has become politically incorrect to believe in Jesus Christ. Just ask yourself, how many films coming out of Hollywood have you seen that portray Christians in a positive light? How many times instead do we find Christians portrayed as shallow, bigoted, villainous hypocrites? What's the public perception of Bible-believing Christians in our culture today? Well, take a look at this cartoon. I hope this cartoon makes you angry. It depicts so accurately the perception of Bible-believing Christians by the cultural elite in American society today. Goofy curiosities. But notice, Christians are not just funny, they're also dangerous. Caution, the sign says. They mustn't be allowed positions of influence in society. Maybe that's why they even need to be penned up. So, why should we care about what our culture thinks of us as Christians? Why can't we just be faithful followers of Christ and live for Him in the midst of a culture that is going to hell in a handbasket? Why should we care what the cultural elite think of us as Christians? Why not just preach the gospel to a dark and dying world? Well, the answer is because the gospel is never heard in isolation. The gospel is always heard against the cultural backdrop in which a person was born and raised. A person who was raised in a culture which is sympathetic to the Christian faith will be open to the gospel in a way that a person who is raised in a secular culture will not. For a person who is thoroughly secularized, you may as well tell him to believe in Santa Claus or the tooth fairy as in Jesus Christ. It will seem that absurd to him. What awaits us in the United States, if our slide into secularism continues, is already evident in Europe. Evangelism is immeasurably more difficult in Europe than it is in the United States. Having lived for 13 years in Europe, where I spoke evangelistically on university campuses across the continent, I can testify to how hard the ground is. It's difficult for the gospel even to get a fair hearing. The United States is following at a distance down this same road, with Canada somewhere in between. If the gospel is to be heard as a viable option for thinking men and women, then we as Christians must try to shape American culture in such a way that Christian belief is an intellectually defensible alternative. It can be done. We are living at a time in history in which Christian philosophy is experiencing an incredible resurgence at a time at which science is more open to the existence of a creator and designer of the universe than at any time in recent memory. And at a time when biblical scholars have embarked upon a new quest of the historical Jesus and have confirmed the main outline of the portrait of Jesus painted in the Gospels. If only Christian laymen could be informed so as to give good answers to unbelievers' questions and objections, and provide solid reasons for why they believe as they do, then the public perception of Christians in our culture will slowly change. Christians will come to be seen as thoughtful people who deserve to be taken seriously, rather than as emotional fanatics. Becoming a Christian will be a reasonable and attractive option for people.